If it wasn't for Insane Trilogy's saving grace, I would call this the beginning of the end. Today I'm reviewing Crash Bandicoot, the Wrath of Cortex, the first post PS1 Crash game. It released on all three main home consoles of the time, PS2, Xbox, GameCube. Back in the day I had rented on the first two systems, but in the last several years I finally got a copy on the remaining system. So, considering the fact I'm a Crash fan and I've played it on all three systems, I felt like it would be a good idea for me to do a review of this. So let's get started, shall we? First up, we're doing graphics. For this bit though, we have gone back to original console footage instead of beautiful emulated footage that you'll find in the majority of this review. Also, excuse 2015 me's gameplay in this section. I'm using GameCube footage across the board, but have experiences elsewhere. As this game was the first game in a new generation, I would be expecting a bit of an improvement from the previous games in the series. But do we have that here? Yes, we do. We see an improvement in this department. But I wouldn't call it a graphical showcase though. Don't get me wrong, it still looks like a decent effort was put in, but due to it being a title from early in the generation, it doesn't look as good as it could have been. If you want the copy with the best graphics though, you're not looking at it right now. Out of the three systems that got this, if you want the one with the best graphics, you'll be wanting the Xbox copy. Not the PS2 or the GameCube one, but if you don't have access to original Xbox or its successor, the 360, the other systems are still okay and won't subtract from your experience of the game. For gameplay, you could say it's pretty similar to the previous main game. This may sound good at first, but it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing comes from the normal platformer sections, as they can remind you of the PS1 trilogy and why you love the series. The curse, on the other hand, comes from the fact they didn't do anything to make the vehicle sections better. They were one of my least favourite elements from Warped. I do have to admit I like the atmosphere levels, but the other vehicles somehow got worse in Wrath of Cortex over Warped. You know you did something wrong when I'm getting attracted to the last game for these sections, despite the fact they weren't my favourite there either. They took that if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach, without checking if it was broken or not. Like, in the Warped, you can play as Crash, his sister, Coco, but this time round, she has a bit more of a variety and more encounters. And Warped she was pretty much just forced in on riding levels and nothing else, which reminds me, where the fuck are my animal riding levels? Not in this game, there's none here, not even one. I am fully aware she was used more in recent encounters like Insane Trilogy and 4, It's About Time. But in those she was pretty much the equivalent of Crash in a Coco skin, gameplay wise. Sort of like what Cortex did in Twin Sanity. In Wrath of Cortex she actually has a different moveset to Crash. But despite saying that, they pretty much have the same effect as a Crash move. So in other words, different, but not really. Back to Crash though. His controls are similar to the PS1 games, and like Warped, he gets powers from the bosses. Most of the powers here though seem like a carbon copy of Warped's lot. The main difference one though is Tiptoe, which allows you to go over the explosive nitro boxes without them blowing up, despite saying a different one existed. The power-ups don't impress me much. Whereas for the bosses, it seems like they took the same approach as Super Mario 64, or at least from a first glance. What I mean by this is, if you get the same guy each fight, Crunch, What makes each boss fight different, however, is elemental masks that affect him and gives him their elemental powers. Then in the final boss he has access to them all. And the main series, enemy shows his face, despite the fact it was the same guy. I think they did bring enough to make them feel like different fights though. But is this a good difference? No, I don't think so. I felt like he had already outstayed his welcome before even finishing fight 2. To wrap it up, gameplay wise, I don't feel like they changed enough to call this an improvement. If anything, by neglecting that, they made it worse.
The story begins with the villains in a meeting around a table where the evil mask Uka is having a go at the rest of them for failing so hard. Cortex initially is silent about a secret, not so secret super weapon that Engine eventually mentions. But Cortex mentions it. Cortex has no power source, and Uka chimes in with a source of power. Group mask called Elementals. Elementals get breeds then tell the new villain, so super weapon. Crunch. Right before we gain control of Crash, Cortex introduced Crunch to the good guys and players, then the game begins. During the duration of the story, that areas Elementals shows up a few times. Then we get to the boss, which is just Crunch affected by that Elemental's element. And eventually you get to the final boss, where Cortex shows his face again, despite the fact the boss is technically still Crunch, but this time with all Elementals at his disposal. Win the fight, and then Crunch on his side, he crushes one, where he will pretty much every other game in the series. Okay, so that's what the story is, but what do I think of it? It does the job and is drove it in the same manner as Warp's one, but how does it compare to that in even another one? I have to say it's not the best one story-wise, but I'd also say it's not the worst either. I place it above Crash 1 if I compared it to the original trilogy, but below Crash 2. Would I go as far as say this is one of the game's redeeming factors? Yes and no. I mean, it does redeem it, but not fully. It goes back to my earlier statement where I say it does the job. If I ignored other Crash games and compared it to other platforms instead though, it's not as basic as some other ones, and how it partially redeems it. But reviewing it as a Crash game, it only just does the job. If it was human, it would be one wrong step away from being 5. Before I finish up, I thought I'd mention a few things that didn't seem worthy enough of a mention to warrant a whole section report. Voices are decent, but the game focuses more on gameplay than cutscenes, so they don't appear that often, but do include Mark Hamill among them. The soundtrack seems to have a similar vibe as the PS1 games, but lacks the uniqueness of Twin Center's Echo Parlor soundtrack. This can vary from additional platforms, but the load times can be ridiculous, which is a noticeable change after the load times, or lack thereof, in the PS1 games. So, in conclusion, what do I think in general? I think it was a good attempt of a Crash game in a new generation. This was the first time they tried to make a post-warped Crash game, but I think the second attempt of a post-warped Crash game was better than this. As a result, I'd give Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex a below average 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching.
Ta-ta for now.